if you're a beginning bass player, there's so many things to think about already. What amps do you need to get? What bass do you want to go with? What's the sound that you're after? But I think more important than anything, if you're going to get into pedals, you got to have a foundation to know what are the basics that you need to start with if you're going to get a couple of pedals to kind of start to build out your pedal board. I thought nobody is better at being able to not only know the range of pedals that are available, but really have a lot of experience with pedals, none other than Janek Gwizdala. So thank you for coming today.
Thank you. I'm not sure if I am the guy, but I certainly own a lot of these pedals, if nothing else. So it's a good starting point.
And we have a good sort of potpourri of bass pedals here. And I think what the goal is today is to narrow down for anybody who is getting into pedals to kind of figure out what are the 4 essentials that they need. We have lots of options here that we can talk about so that we kind of have an idea if you're, again, new to this or you're just starting to build out your board. You know about the pedals that you should be looking at and how they might sound.
Well, let's go. Let's what's up for your first slot?
When I think about bass pedals, I think definitely having a preamp of some kind is essential. I think because I'm a guitar player, we love anything that kind of does coloration, maybe distortion.
Sure.
So I always like to think that that's something that you always are going to need. So what do you have for us that are kind of in the preamp range of pedals?
Aside from the obvious, in that basses are quite often active.
Yep.
Obviously not a P bass or something like that, but it does happen that basses are active, so you have to take into consideration the power coming out of the instrument and what color, like you said, that's giving you. In terms of what I put on my board, I have a couple of things from Exotic Effects. They're made here in California. The Trilogic and the Trilogic 2. Really simple. It's just a little EQ, little warmth, little boost, and I use them really like that. Very, very simple. And I use it as an always on pedal.
Got it.
Often hidden under the riser of the Vertex pedal boards.
Right.
You know, that's a massive part of those risers for me is that stuff like this, always on and underneath. I also have from Exotic the Bass BB preamp, which I don't use as a preamp. It's actually when I max out the gain and roll in the volume, this is actually a great distortion pedal.
Right.
Even though it sounds good as a bass preamp, I actually use that as a distortion.
Right, and then, of course, there's other stuff like the Sans amp, of course, is another one that kind of falls into a similar range that, of course, was a classic that many bass players used for a long time. But definitely, I think for me, an important slot, if we're going to narrow this down to the 4 essentials, I think preamp, unquestionably. Exotic makes some great ones. Sans amp has some great ones. So if you want to go full out, though, you can go with its own Pelican case.
Yes, the Noble. This has become sort of a staple. You're going to see players like Sean Hurley, Tim LaFave, you know, some real
Pino
serious...
Palladino, too.
Oh, he's using that now?
Yeah,
I didn't even know. So some real serious high-end bass players using the Noble preamp. You won't see it like this with the tubes and the power supply exposed. You're not going to pick this up on camera, but Mason can see it right here. Number 9.
Yeah,
this
number
is
9.
Serial number 9. I got one of the almost first ones from Jack up in Santa Cruz. The price tag is hefty,
right?
But the payoff is even mightier than the price tag as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, because he's incorporated all this stuff inside.
So now everything's inside. This is a little less pedal board friendly. It's a little more delicate. Hence the Pelican case. Hence I don't take this outside of the studio. But it's way more pedal board friendly now with everything internalized, and it sounds unbelievable.
Yeah, it's a great option if you want to go like full out, you know, kind of have the most boutique option.
Right, but we're talking like a 10x price from here to here. So, you know, this for all budgets we're going for today.
Sure, yeah, you go Sans amp, you could go Exotic, you could go Noble. Exactly. All of them are great. So that was my pick. What do you think is another one that we really need to mention here for kind of essential pedal board?
I think it's got to be Compressor, right?
Compressor. Yeah.
I don't have. Actually, I think I only have one with me.
You got the Boss too.
Oh, I got the Boss as well. So I do have a little vintage accent. Obviously, like anything good that ever gets made, they almost immediately get discontinued. This is an old compression sustainer CS2, little vintage from the, I guess, late 80s, early 90s.
Yep.
Boss, made in Japan. This is the one I use. This is from Miura, made right here in California, the Miura M2 compressor limiter. I'm not smashing the sound. I'm not the slap guy particularly, although that is very useful for this, getting harmonics to sing out, getting a nice solid consistent sound for slap bass, for R&B pocket, for gospel music. This is just a little warming of the sound for me, and a little kind of consistency in the top and low end of the range.
Yeah, that Boss one is definitely like very much a color,
big
like
time.
really squashed.
And that's when I use it, is when I want something kind of weird and dynamic and kind of, out of the box.
Absolutely. And I think also other stuff, to mention that's popular amongst bass players, like the Cali 76.
Cali 76
is a huge one that a lot of people are into. And also Dunlop has some really cool ones with the MXR compressors.
Absolutely.
Are really budget friendly.
And the mini one.
Yeah.
Like the one that is the same size as their vintage bass Octave. In this, like, look at this in terms of chassis, pedalboard, real estate. That's a huge thing. Ampeg has one, I know. A bunch of people are having some really nice compressors out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so you got a couple of different versions. You can go high end with Cali 76 or something like the, you said it was Miura,
and something right in the middle. This is obviously the Octave version, but the same chassis, same size, same pedal, quality build by Aguilar. They also have a compressor that's the blue pedal, somewhere right in the middle of the range, sub $200.
Yeah, so many great choices for bass. I mean, we're in the golden age of pedals, so you have just option overload. It's like drinking water from a fire hose now. All right, so we talked about the preamp. We talked about compressors.
Yeah.
I think the next one is definitely fuzz, and I almost feel like I shouldn't even be the one sharing fuzz because you are such a user of fuzz devices. What do we got here that are some great examples for
Well, here's the
bass
thing.
fuzz?
The first thing with me and you, with the signal chain order, again, we've talked about this before in videos. Neither one of us is right. We just have different opinions about what goes where and what works for either of us as we hear music. For me, my next slot, we can totally talk about fuzz. It's actually Octave, because I like Octave into fuzz instead of fuzz into Octave.
Okay.
But we'll get to that. We'll go Mason's route, which is a 1,000,000% valid. And I'm, like Mason said, a massive fan of fuzz and have some pretty badass ones here, I gotta say. Let's go with the old, with the Impossible, the Unobtainium. It's the Sovtek Big Muff tall font from early 90s, made in Russia, Electro Harmonics.
Yes.
You are going to break the bank trying to buy one of these. This is, it looks pretty crappy, but it's actually a pretty mint version.
Yeah, this is like weaponized fuzz.
And
right
it's
here.
been modded for for a regular power supply, so you don't have to run it on batteries. It's noisy, it's loud, it's big. Yeah, Juan Alderete from the Mars Volta. That's who I heard using that first. It's been on 1,000 different great records.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing piece of kit. Well, it's the next peg down, I guess, in the price range. No less brutal is the Zevex Woolly Mammoth. Super hard to tame, but it's an unbelievably cool gated fuzz. You have some gating options on there, which is very musical. These two bad boys from Jam Pedals, the Red Muck and the Rattler, pretty aggressive and abusive, beautiful sounding pedals. Again, pedals for all budgets. A lot of bass players are going to know this. Darkglass electronics are taking over the bass world, the gent, the prog, the metal world. They are super efficient, compact, beautifully made, great sounding, modern kind of fuzz distortion pedals. And maybe we'll save this for the
filter,
for the filter
we
side.
also have the Ren and Cuff.
Oh, sorry, Ren and Cuff right here. Who are also right here in California, I think. Ren and Cuff. It's kind of, if you want this, but you've got this kind of budget, it's an amazing sounding pedal.
Right. And
it really does. So what we should preface is so many of these fuzz pedals are based on
the Muff. Yeah.
Everyone's trying to copy that. It's like. What's a guitar pedal that everyone copies?
Tube Screamer.
Tube Screamer, there you go. So this is our Tube Screamer. This is the bass world's Tube Screamer. Everyone tries to copy it.
Yeah, and I think even now Electro Harmonics has different sort of more budget versions that they even make.
Absolutely.
That are, so you can get them for maybe sub $150, and then if you want sort of like an excellent build quality,
then you're going into a boutique builder, and I would rate the boutique builders versions over the newer Electro Harmonics ones. Personally, my preference, when I play the modern ones that you can go get in Guitar Center, it doesn't really stack up to that. And something like the Ren and Cuff is about as close as it gets, or the Red Muck from Jam Pedals.
Yeah, lots of really great options here. So we talked about fuzz, but you kind of detoured us on Octave, so that's kind of our fourth position here. So just to recap, though, we got preamp, we have compressor. You would put Octave.
I would put Octave next.
And then we already talked about fuzz. So let's go kind of in that third order. Let's do octave.
Sure.
What do you got?
And the reason I put octave before the fuzz is because I play a lot of electronic music as opposed to rock music.
Yep.
And if I was playing rock music, absolutely the fuzz would go earlier. I just want a little more of the point of the sine wave, that electronic sound that an OC2, for instance, can give me before it goes into the fuzz, which I'm using as a square wave to modulate and give me a synth bass sound. That's the reason I put it in that order.
And this is the rarest of them all. Silver
Rarest of
screw
all.
OC2.
Okay. So you would think this is just me, like being vain. These are some of the only pedals in this era that didn't come with a silver screw. I just found some silver screws.
Oh, I just put them on there?
And put one on there, yeah, because this actually had a wood screw in it when I bought it. It just
Really?
had like a flat Phillips head wood screw in it. I was like, I can't keep it like that. So I got some silver screws. These actually came with a black screw. But this is actually the first batch, 1982, Octave with the R on it. The later ones just had the, were called Octave without the R. Very specific coloring, slightly higher mounted power supply. I'm a little bit of a nerd when it comes to OC2s. I own 21 of them. So this is the bad boy, the most expensive. If it has the box and papers, as us watch fans like to say, you're gonna spend almost as much as a big muff on it. Like they can go $600-700. Insane, beautiful sound though. Now, what MXR did was took this exact pedal, literally this pedal in my hand. I sent it up to MXR, and they built this pedal out of it, the vintage bass octave. They cloned this. This is what's currently on my board. Even though I own 21 of these original bad boys, this is actually what is currently on my board.
Certainly more practical.
It's practical. Look at the real estate. It's unbelievable. It's got the top jack. I love it. It's even got a little mid boost, so you can do other things with it. It does have a crossover with the bass octave deluxe, which is kind of a classic bass octave from MXR. It's a little more pointy, a little more mid range. It's a little more of the recreation and octave down of the natural sound of your bass.
Got it.
Whereas I'm using this to make more of a sine wave, and I'm taking the clean signal of the bass completely out. So
Got it.
those are basically my octave options. And of course, we showed this a little bit earlier, the Aguilar Optimizer. Great pedal, super solid, great road pedal. And then I have this kind of combination, fuzz and octave in one. So octave divider, more like a Mutron, but with a fuzz circuit, which is by a company called Gojira up in Scotland in the UK. Very fun pedals.
All right, so to recap,
Yeah.
the four we talked about.
Right.
Talked about preamps. We talked about compressors.
Yes.
We talked about in the Gwizdala method, octave, and then finishing with fuzz. Now, I think that there's a few honorable mentions on here that could be added, which I think we want to go with. So,
well, there
first
are
honorable.
thousands, I think. Some sort of anything in the modulation department. We could talk about flanges and about phasers, about classic sounds of bass from the 70s, perhaps. But before we started filming, you used the word typecast.
Right.
As soon as you switch on certain pedals, you're immediately typecast to, oh, I've got a Mutron, I sound like Bootsy Collins.
Right.
You know, I've got a fuzz pedal, I sound like this John Paul Jones or something. You know what I mean? Like, so some of my favorites. Here's another vintage one. They don't make anymore. I haven't made it for 20 years or more. It's the tremolo pan, the Boss PN2. It does exactly what it says on the box. It is a tremolo and it is a stereo pan. Sounds incredible. I would say one of my favorite modulation time-based effects are delays and modulated delays. Something like the Jam Pedals, the Delay Llama Extreme, has some pitch shifting, which is always fun.
Right.
Some modulation. And then the big boy in the box, it's like getting an old bottle of fine wine out.
Yeah.
Also Russian made, Electro Harmonics, original bass balls, which is kind of a filtered distortion.
Yeah.
Even still has the original card in it. I'll be able to sell that for a fortune one day with that. So, not that I will ever sell it. This super fun pedal. Used to use this with Jojo Mejia with his electronic music band Nerve. Probably haven't used it in 15 years or more.
Right.
More of a collector's item. But it does fall in the category of, wild cards.
Right. So filter could be kind of a component of that wild card in addition to modulation.
For
Whether
sure.
it's like if you're going for Marcus Miller, sometimes you have to have those phasers or the vintage kind of MXR stuff, or you may have again some sort of filter pedal, like you said, Bootsy Collins. Of course, the risk of typecast whenever
With
you're
the
dealing
Neutron
with,
and that kind of stuff.
or the
And-
Moog.
The Moog, the MF101. I used that for many years. There's the WMD Super Fat Man. I happen to use the Iron Ether Zero Graph Deluxe, amazing filter. And even pedals like the Meris Autobit Junior has one of the best sounding filters in it I've ever heard. And you can put a TRS expression cable in an expression pedal, and suddenly the Meris is not just a bit crusher. also a thing that you could have on your, variable list of pedals, but it's also an amazing filter if you just use it clean. We would probably have to cap it off with some sort of multi-effects.
Right. If you don't want to get all this stuff and you just need to have it simple and in one box.
Right,
Yeah.
and if you've watched Vertex Effects pedals and the channel and like all of the pedal boards that get put together for all these musicians, bass players, guitar players alike, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of information. It's a ton of pedals, and like Mason said, if you don't want to go through all of that, something like this. This is a HX Stomp. This is the XL version. It's the slightly bigger boy, a little more access with more pedals. You can do more programming. You can have basically everything on this table right here in one box. It's the one-stop shop, plus amp modeling and IRs and all that kind of stuff. So what I will say is that you probably get this pedal and maybe this pedal for the same price of this. It's pretty crazy. Like if you were to add up all of this, you'd probably buy a nice small car.
Yeah.
Versus something more affordable and maybe a little more utility.
Yeah. And if you're starting out, this could also be a really good option to use a multi-effects like an HX Stomp or HX Effects.
Yeah.
Just to sort of attune your ear and your taste to what you like. Because if you go after the high-end Big Muff, that's, $800 or something like that, you're definitely restricted your budget. You don't even know if you really like this if you're starting to build your pedalboard. You can kind of like figure out what you like with the multi-effects and then kind of add in pedals du jour based on what you like.
Exactly, and the way the block system works in here, it's just like plugging in a ton of different stomp boxes.
Right.
That's what I love about this thing. And you can experiment and then go, okay, you know what? I love like 5 things in here, but I want the one thing that's boutique.
Right, use these to supplement.
Exactly.
that.
And then it's got an effects loop, and you plug that in, and suddenly you're just 2 pedals, but you have a really nice boutique fuzz, for instance, and you haven't wrecked your budget, and you're learning about effects the whole time with the way this works.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Janek, this was such a cool opportunity to go through with the real bass player. I feel sort of like a fraud when I talk about bass gear because I don't really play bass, and so I'm sort of using like a theoretical sort of conversational approach, whereas this is rooted in an actual pro bass player. So thank you for capping this off for us again. We talked about compressors, we talked about preamps, we talked about fuzzes, we talked about
Octave pedals.
Octave pedals, and we talked about some wild cards, maybe some filtering, maybe some modulation, or going with multi-effects. So lots of things to consider here. We're going to put links in the description for kind of all the major food groups here. We talked about some of the pedals that we recommended and that are available at different price points. And we'll also put a link to Janek's channel, which is absolutely an incredible YouTube channel that you need to check out if you're a bass player. You will be remiss if you haven't checked this thing out. And if you want to learn more about the stuff that we're doing, rig builds, whether that's bass stuff, whether that's guitar stuff, all the different techniques, approaches, materials, definitely head over to vertexeffects.com or therigdr.com. We have lots of different resources for how to build the boards, the materials that you need, and all that stuff. And easy, free ways to engage with us is just go over to our podcast. We have a new episode that drops almost every single week. In addition to that, we offer some support for bass players and guitar players on our Patreon channel, which you can check out if you want to do some paid services or be able to connect directly with me and my team about your rig, troubleshooting, etc. Until next time, I'm Mason Marangella from Vertex Effects, aka the Rig Doctor.
I'm Janek Gwizdala. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I did. That's why I'm here with all these pedals. That's why you see the rig builds that I put up on YouTube. It's because of Mason. It's because of vertexeffects.com. Subscribe to the channel. It's free.
Free. See ya.